Hey everyone, welcome to Sidetrack Adventures. This is Steve. Right now we're in southeastern Arizona, and today we're going to be exploring the historic ghost town of Fairbank, which was an important town in the Old West, as it was the nearest railroad stop to Tombstone. We are currently about 9 miles west of Tombstone, right off Arizona Highway 82. Fairbank has been called the best preserved ghost town in Arizona's Cochise County, and for a short time, it was an important place in the area's Old West history, and was even the scene of a train robbery and shootout. And the reason it's the best preserved ghost town is because there are actually still a few buildings standing. There was once a Native American village near here. Then starting in 1823, this whole area was part of a Mexican land grant. And that fact will also come back up later when we get to the town's demise. The town came about in 1881 when the railroad was being built through the area, with a railroad station opening in 1882. Eventually, 3 different railroad lines would come through the area, and from here you could take a stagecoach to Tombstone. I'm not exactly sure what this building was, but let's take a closer look. So this town was originally known as Junction City, then Kendall, then Fairbanks with an S, before finally settling on Fairbank on May 16, 1883, when the first post office opened. It looks like this may just be a shed or a workshop, but let's peek through this siding. And this looks like a chicken coop. Fairbank is named for Nathaniel K. Fairbank, who was an investor who played a key role in both financing the railroad and organizing the Central Mining Company in Tombstone. Right behind the shed or workshop and chicken coop is the most important building in town, the outhouse. And this one's a double, so you can have some company. This building is labeled as a garage. Here's some barbed wire, and we'll take a look inside. Now, I don't know the dates that these buildings were constructed. There's no signs on them, and the flyer doesn't say anything. And yeah, this is certainly a garage. There's a safe in here, though. This building is the school teacher's house, and it even looks like some of the sidewalk is still here. Being the closest railroad station to Tombstone was a big deal. Just to show how big Tombstone was, in 1881 it had a population of 7,000 to 10,000 people, while Arizona as a whole only had around 40,000 residents in the 1880 census. So nearly a quarter of the state living there. And I'm just looking to see if there's any writing on the sidewalk. I thought that might have been, but once I got up close, it didn't look like it. Tombstone wouldn't be connected to a railroad line until 1903, well past the boom period. And I believe this house was built around 1925. And to show how close the teacher's house was to the school, that is the school right across the street. Here's a closer look at the schoolhouse. This was built in 1920 after the original wooden schoolhouse burned down in 1917. The school closed in 1944, and now it's the Fairbank Museum. Here's the classroom, and we'll probably spend a few minutes in here because it is air conditioned in here, and it is hot outside. Being the closest railroad stop, supplies for Tombstone came through Fairbank, and then ore from Tombstone mines would pass through Fairbank on the way to stamp mills in places like Contention City and Charleston. Here are some different artifacts from the town.
All right, thanks so much for your help.
Here's another look at the schoolhouse. It's not very big, but then again, the population here never got very big either. It peaked at a little bit less than 500 around 1890. And of course, with this being a railroad town, we are on Railroad Avenue. Most people in town either worked for the railroad or the nearby mill. Then later, after the mill was gone, for a ranch. I believe one of the town's original railroad stations would have been right over here. We'll see a different station a little bit later. And then the oldest building still existing in the town, dating back to 1882, is the Mercantile right over here. Once the railroad was built, Fairbank quickly grew to include a Wells Fargo office, 5 saloons, 4 stores, 3 restaurants, a school, a jail, and a mill. And the wooden building right next to the Mercantile is a house. Once the town was formed, residential lots cost anywhere from $50 to $150. And this Mercantile, opening in 1882, is the oldest still standing building in town, and it was actually the last one to close as well. This was open until 1973. It looks like it may have even had gas pumps at one point. This was really the business center of town. Right next door to it was the Montezuma Hotel. This hotel opened in 1889 and was torn down in 1942 when Highway 82 was widened. From this side, we can get a good look at the adobe brick that the Mercantile is made out of. The Tombstone mines, because of flooding and depleted gold and silver ore, ceased operations in 1887, and this in turn caused the ore processing mills to shut down. Thanks to the railroad, this town was able to hang on, but then in September 1890, the San Pedro River overflowed, causing devastating flooding that did significant property damage. The town successfully rebuilt and persisted, though. Remember earlier when I mentioned this whole area sits on a Mexican land grant from the 1820s? Now it's time to get back to that. In 1880, mining magnate George Hearst and his partner George Hill Howard bought the land grant in Mexico, with Hearst soon becoming the sole owner. Then, after Hearst's death, his son, William Randolph Hearst, the same person that Citizen Kane was based on, inherited the grant in 1891. Homesteaders had been settling the land, but in 1899, the courts confirmed that only the Hearst family held a valid title. Just 2 years later, in 1901, the Hearst sold the grant to the Boquillas Land and Cattle Company. The company kept a handful of leases for the Mercantile here and a few residences, but most settlers were evicted, so the land could be turned into rangeland. Residents did try to fight it, but the case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which affirmed that the land grant was valid. From that point on, Fairbank withered away. By the mid 20th century, it was nearly deserted, and in 1974, the post office closed for good. Of course, what's an old west town without a shootout? So we're going to head about a quarter mile down the river trail and see what's left of an old depot, and talk about the time that this little rail stop was the scene of a bloody showdown. We didn't even go a quarter mile, maybe a tenth of a mile or so, but it looks like what's left of the depot is right over here. What I'm about to talk about, this is not the depot where it took place. That depot is long gone. This is the only depot that still has some part of it remaining. The main depot unfortunately burned down in the 1980s. So there's not a whole lot left of the station, but you can see the platform here. And of course, this is where the rails would have been. On February 15th, 1900, the Burt Alvord gang tried to rob the express car of a Benson to Nogales train. Unfortunately for them, inside was Jeff Milton, a former lawman, now an express messenger. As the outlaws stormed the car, Milton fought back. Though a shotgun blast tore through his arm, he kept firing, driving the bandits off. One of them, the notorious three-fingered Jack Dunlop, was hit in the stomach and would die from his wounds. The rest of the gang scattered, and the robbery failed. Another famous outlaw, Bill Downing, was also involved in the robbery. He was actually acquitted of the robbery, but found guilty of interfering with the United States mail. Here's an old railroad bridge. We'll take a closer look, see if we see any dates on it. The federal government acquired all this land in a land swap in 1986, so it's all run by the Bureau of Land Management now. So far, I'm not seeing any dates, but then again, I'm not really willing to bushwhack for them either. Last time I was in this area, I saw quite a few deer, but nothing so far today. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing any dates, but let's head back into town because there's still one more place we need to check out. There aren't a lot of buildings here, but it still gets the honor of being the best preserved ghost town in Cochise County because most of the other ghost towns have virtually no buildings left. So we're going to head about 4/10 of a mile on this trail to the town cemetery. This trail is for both foot and horse traffic, but if we look right behind where you could tie off your horses here, kind of in the woods, looks like there's a little bit of a clearing. There probably would have been a house here at one point. It looks like something used to be over here too. Same with over here, we have another clearing and you can see wood and metal all over the place. There probably would have been houses right here. Oh yeah, it looks like we even have a pipe over here. Most everything would have been torn down by the ranch. I mean, there's only a handful of buildings left in the town now, but it's kind of amazing to think that at one point, 500 people lived out here. We have a little bit of shade here, but it's probably close to 90 degrees right now. But anytime I'm walking down a road like this, I could just imagine a stagecoach coming through here or outlaws riding their horses down this road. This just looks like the type of road you'd see in a movie. And we're turning off the main trail to the cemetery, and it doesn't look like it gets that many visitors based on the trail. I've also heard after 100 plus years it's not in the best condition, so we'll have to see what there is to see. Since we're nearly a half mile from the town site, I'm kind of curious to why they put the cemetery all the way out here. Usually there's a reason for it. Maybe there's a view or something out here. Either that or they just wanted the graves out of sight, out of mind. It looks like there's a hill up ahead though. My guess is the cemetery is going to be on top of that. And sure enough, we're heading uphill. I thought I was about to get attacked by a bird for a second there. I don't know if the camera caught how close that bird came, but I heard a noise coming and I turned my head and a bird flew right by my face. I'm sure it just wants me to get out of its territory. There's supposed to be anywhere from 30 to 60 graves up here, but most of them are unknown. There is a guy, though, and I'll link his website in the description, that's been researching this cemetery and has been able to find out the names of a number of the people that are buried here. And since this is the only high spot around, there might be something of a view up here. Alright, we've made it, and check out this view. We'll head over to the edge. We should have a view of the river and pretty much the whole area. And it looks like one of the graves was right here, but there's not much left of it now. Here's another one. Like I mentioned, most of these are going to be unmarked, and I'm not actually sure if any of these have any names or dates on them still. When the cemetery was active, it was up to the families of the people buried here to keep it maintained. But now, more than a century later, there's no one alive that even knew anyone that was buried here. So as time went on, there's just been less and less upkeep. There are graves seemingly in every bush, but so far I haven't seen any names. According to the website, the last known burial here was in 1934. This one over here might actually have a headstone. It looks like it says, Mary Nelson, wife of A.B. McCuller, died 1899. This one's been knocked over, but it does have a name on it. It looks like this one was for an infant. Died in 1919. And here's another 1919 burial. I don't see a date of birth on this one. And then a few more unmarked ones over here. The marker's gone, but the fence is still up on this one. Unfortunately, wooden grave markers just don't stand the test of time. Most of the people buried here were laborers or ranch workers, or family members of laborers or ranch workers, and they just couldn't afford more permanent grave markers. But unfortunately, because of that, a lot of their names are lost now. Here's a better look at the view from up here. There's the river down below us. And the town of Fairbank is back in this direction somewhere. These unmarked graves kind of remind you that the frontier was built on stories both remembered and forgotten. So that's our look at the ghost town of Fairbank, Arizona. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and we'll see you next week.